You ever get blindsided so hard it feels like the air's been sucked out of the room? Like every sound is muffled, your heartbeat suddenly the loudest thing you can hear? That's what happened the day Marcus Varrion walked into a so-called routine check-in with HR. The office was too clean, too staged. Tracy from HR sat there, lips pressed into that polite but empty smile she wore when something ugly was about to happen. Next to her was Greg Mathers, the regional director flown in from corporate headquarters wearing his $1,000 suit and smug Rolex grin. "Marcus, thanks for making the time," Tracy said, sliding a thin folder across the IKEA desk. Inside, one sheet, one number that didn't look real no matter how long Marcus stared at it. 50% pay cut, effective immediately. He blinked once, twice, like maybe the ink would rearrange itself into something less devastating. But it didn't. $62,000. Down from $124,000, Greg leaned back in his chair, practiced calm. "We've been reviewing market standards for your role, Marcus. Given the restructuring, we feel this is a more aligned compensation package moving forward. Market standards, aligned. Corporate buzzwords that translated to, we don't care about your mortgage, your kids, or the decade you gave this company. You're cheaper now." Marcus forced a smile. "I'll need 24 hours to consider this," he said, his voice steady in a way that surprised even him. He knew he sounded like some cold executive weighing a merger, not a man being gutted. Tracy nodded quickly, relieved he wasn't exploding. Greg smirked like the decision was already made. Marcus walked out without a word. He didn't remember packing his laptop, didn't remember the elevator ride down, but he remembered the car. Sitting in that concrete parking garage, hands gripping, the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. And then it hit him, ugly, gasping sobs, the kind that fogged the windows and left his chest aching. 9 years. 9 years of late nights, canceled vacations, missing his daughter's dance recitals, missing his son's birthday dinners, always telling himself it was worth it because he was building something, securing their future. And now, they'd slashed him in half with a single sheet of paper. He thought about calling his ex-wife, but what could he even say? That the child support he'd been religiously paying might now bankrupt him? That their carefully balanced custody schedule might collapse? Because he'd have to take on more side work just to stay afloat? No. He sat there alone, letting it all pour out, until the tears finally ran dry. Marcus wiped his face with the heel of his hand, opened his phone, and saw the red notification bubble from LinkedIn, 14 unread messages. He almost ignored them. But something made him pause. One was from an old colleague, another from a recruiter, another from someone he didn't recognize but whose company name he did, one of his own firm's fiercest competitors. He didn't respond. Not yet. His whole world had just been leveled. But still, something stirred in him, the faintest spark. Maybe I'm not as trapped as they think, and hey, before I keep going, if you're still with me in this story, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it tells me that you're out there, that this isn't just me screaming into the void. Drop a comment too, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's listening. Back in the car, Marcus took a long breath. The pay cut wasn't the end. It was the shove, the cruel push that forced him to look at the truth. The company didn't value him anymore. Maybe they never really had, but the part they didn't understand, the part Greg and Tracy hadn't factored into their market standards, was that Marcus had built relationships, real ones, clients who trusted him, suppliers who answered his calls first, colleagues who came to him when the sky was falling because he always knew how to steady the ship. That wasn't in the spreadsheets. That wasn't on the HR form. But Marcus knew it. Deep down, beneath the hurt, he knew it. So when his phone buzzed again, this time a call from a name he hadn't seen in months, he didn't let it go to voicemail. "Marcus, it's Alan," the voice said. Alan, his old teammate who'd left 6 months ago for greener pastures. "I don't know if you've seen the news, but I've been trying to reach you. Listen, I think we need to talk. You might not realize it yet, but you're holding the one thing they can't afford to lose." Marcus sat there in silence, pulse still hammering. The sting of the pay cut still burned, but now another feeling crept in alongside it. Something dangerous, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. Greg and Tracy had said, every smug little look, every line in that HR folder. His mind spun circles, numbers, bills, custody schedules, his kids' medical needs. It all stacked like weights on his chest. At 2 a.m., he got up, walked into the kitchen, and opened his laptop. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, maybe some hidden clause in his contract, some loophole that could save him. He found nothing but the same old corporate jargon he'd signed years ago when he was still naive enough to believe loyalty meant something. His hands shook as he scrolled through LinkedIn messages again. Recruiters, competitors, Old colleagues who'd left after the merger, some offering sympathy, some offering, let's grab coffee. He typed replies, then deleted them. Typed again, deleted again. By 3:30, he was pacing the living room, muttering to himself, 9 years, and this is what I get. The memories started crowding in, driving through snowstorms to make client meetings while corporate leaders dialed, and from their beach houses, pulling all-nighters with his team to hit impossible deadlines while execs pocketed bonuses. Missing his daughter's first piano recital because Greg needed him on a conference call that could have been an email. He thought about his kids, Ethan and Lily, sleeping down the hall. He peeked in their rooms. Ethan was sprawled across his bed, hugging a stuffed dinosaur he'd had since kindergarten. Lily slept curled up, her little nightlight casting soft shadows across the walls. Marcus's throat tightened. He whispered into the dark, I'm not going to let them take this from us. Not again. But he didn't know what this was yet. His job was gutted, his pride shattered, his future blurred. The next morning, he walked into the office like nothing had happened. Smile plastered on, tie straightened. No one could know, not yet. His team needed him steady, not broken. But inside, he was crumbling. At lunch, he sat in his car again, scrolling through his phone. That's when Alan called back. Marcus, I'm serious, Alan said. You've got leverage. They think they cut you down, but they forgot what you actually bring. Clients trust you, Marcus. They follow you. That's power. And power is the one thing they can't spreadsheet away. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Alan, I can't just walk away. I've got kids, a mortgage, support payments. They know I can't afford to quit. That's why they did this. Or, Alan countered, that's why you can't afford to stay. The words hit him like a punch. He sat there stunned, phone pressed to his ear, realizing Alan was right. Staying meant slow death by stress and humiliation. Leaving meant chaos, but maybe, just maybe, it meant freedom too. Still, fear dug its claws in. Lawsuits, non-competes, retaliation. What if he left and couldn't land anywhere else? What if he lost everything? That night, he sat at the dinner table with Ethan and Lily. They laughed about school stories, spilled juice on the table, argued over who got the last chicken nugget. For a few minutes, Marcus almost forgot. But then Ethan, serious beyond his 10 years, looked at him and said, Dad, why do you always look so tired lately? Marcus froze. He tried to brush it off. Just work stuff, buddy. But the words tasted bitter, out of the mouths of kids. They saw through everything. After bedtime, Marcus poured himself a drink and sat in the quiet house. He stared at his reflection in the dark TV screen, tired eyes, unshaven jaw, a man who'd been running on fumes for years. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about whether he was willing to let people who didn't know his kids' names, who didn't care if he sank or swam, decide his worth. He thought about calling Greg and telling him where he could shove that HR folder. Thought about marching into Tracy's office and dropping his badge on her desk. But that would be giving them what they wanted, a broken man walking away with nothing. No, if he was going to go down, he'd go down on his terms. And maybe, just maybe, he'd rise instead. The breaking point wasn't the meeting. It wasn't even the crying in the car. It was right there, in his quiet house, staring at his reflection. The moment he realized he couldn't just accept this, he whispered it out loud like a vow. I'm done letting them own me. What he didn't know was that this decision, the one he made in silence, in the dark, was the start of everything. The next week was hell. Marcus wore his professional mask at work, nodded through meetings, pretended the cut hadn't gutted him, but every time he looked at his paycheck, the humiliation gnawed deeper. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being told, without words, you're not worth what you think you are. Still, he kept showing up. Not for Greg, not for Tracy, not for the company, for his team, for the younger employees who came to him when clients got restless, for the people who whispered, if you leave, this whole place falls apart. And then came the call. He was driving home late, stuck in traffic, when Alan's name lit up his phone again. Marcus answered, expecting the same pep talk as before. But Alan's voice was different this time, sharper, focused. Marcus, I'm putting something together, Alan said. A new outfit. Smaller, leaner, but smarter. We've already got investors circling. What we don't have is someone who knows the business inside out and has relationships clients actually trust. That's you. Marcus gripped the steering. Yeah. Wheel tighter. Alan, I can't just jump ship. You know they'll bury me in non-competes, and what if it tanks? I can't drag my kids through that. Alan didn't flinch. Listen, they already cut you in half. How much worse does it have? To get before you realize you're free? You're not chained, Marcus. You're being offered a key. Take it. The line went quiet. Traffic inched forward. Marcus's heart pounded. Alan finally spoke again. Let's meet tomorrow. No pressure, no signatures, just a conversation. Worst case, you say no. Best case, you start building something. That's yours. Marcus wanted to say no, wanted to cling to the illusion of safety, even if it was a sinking ship. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he heard himself say, all right, tomorrow. They met at a diner on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Coffee mugs that never emptied, cracked vinyl booths, the smell of bacon grease in the air. Alan was already there, a folder spread across the table, his eyes bright with energy Marcus hadn't seen in years. Here's the deal, Alan said, sliding a paper across. We've got a couple of angel investors who believe in us. We've got tech that's faster and cheaper than the big guys are using. And we've got an opening in the market because of all the merger chaos. It's the perfect storm. Marcus stared at the numbers. The projections looked ambitious, maybe even reckless, but something about it lit a fire inside him. Alan, I've got responsibilities. I can't risk everything. Alan leaned forward. You think staying where you are isn't a risk? They've shown you exactly what you're worth to them. Half. What happens next year when they decide it's a quarter? Or nothing? At least this way, you control the outcome. Marcus sat back, running a hand over his face. He thought of Ethan. And Lily. He thought of Greg's smug smirk. He thought of the late nights, the missed moments, the endless sacrifices that led to this. Alan's voice softened. You've been carrying their company for years. Now it's time to carry your own. That night, Marcus couldn't sit still. He paced the house, folder in hand, reading the projections until the numbers blurred. He kept hearing Alan's words, "You're free, you're holding the key." Fear wrestled with excitement inside him. One minute he pictured building something incredible. The next, he pictured bankruptcy, losing the house, failing his kids. But every time doubt rose, so did another image. Greg, leaning back in his chair, telling Marcus his worth had been realigned. That memory burned like fuel. By 2 a.m., Marcus was at the kitchen table, scribbling on a legal pad. Names of clients he could call, suppliers who'd trust him over the corporation, old colleagues who might follow if given the chance. The list grew longer with every line. And with each name, Marcus felt the fear loosen its grip. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't just reacting, he was planning. The call had opened a door. And though stepping through terrified him, staying where he was terrified him more. This was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming control. Marcus looked at the pad, then at his reflection in the dark kitchen window. He saw a man with tired eyes, yes, but also a man with fire left in him. And he said it again, this time louder, steadier. I'm done letting them own me. For a week, Marcus lived in two worlds. By day, he was still the loyal VP, running meetings, calming angry clients, making sure his team didn't collapse under the weight of corporate chaos. He smiled, he nodded, he played the role. But by night, his kitchen table became war room headquarters, legal pads covered in notes. Alan's folder opened wide, numbers circled and underlined, lists of potential clients, suppliers, and allies. It felt like living with a secret identity. One life was safe but suffocating, and the other terrifying but alive. And the clock was ticking. Alan was pressing. Investors wanted an answer. The window wouldn't stay open forever. Marcus knew it, but every time he got close to saying yes, doubt came crashing in. He pictured his kids' faces, the house, the steady paycheck, even halved, that kept things stable. What if this gamble left them with nothing? The breaking point came one Friday afternoon. Marcus had just finished smoothing over a massive client issue, something that should have been catastrophic, but he'd pulled strings, made calls, and fixed it. The client was happy. Crisis averted. He expected at least a nod of recognition. A good work from Greg. Instead, Greg strolled into his office, leaned on the doorframe, and said, Marcus, I need you to take a 7 p.m. call tonight with the Tokyo team. Shouldn't be more than 3 hours. Marcus blinked. Greg, it's Friday. I've got my kids tonight. Greg's face hardened. We all make sacrifices, Marcus. That's why you're here. Something in Marcus snapped. He nodded, said nothing, and Greg walked away smug as ever. But inside, Marcus wasn't just angry. He was done. The resentment that had been simmering boiled over into clarity. This wasn't sacrifice. This was servitude, and servitude was killing him. That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus sat at the table staring at Alan's folder. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, took one sip, and pushed it aside. He wanted a clear head. He pulled out his phone and called Alan. I'm in, Marcus said. Alan exhaled, relieved. You won't regret this? Marcus wasn't so sure, but he knew one thing. He'd regret staying. The next days blurred into a frenzy. Secret meetings at diners and coffee shops. Long calls at night after the kids were in bed. drafting business plans, mapping out client outreach, quietly building the skeleton of a new company. The fear didn't go away. It sat heavy on his chest every morning. But it was different now. Fear mixed with adrenaline, with purpose. One night, Marcus sat with Ethan and Lily at dinner. Ethan was excitedly explaining his science project. Lily was showing off a drawing she made. And Marcus realized something. For the first time in months, he wasn't dreading tomorrow. He was scared, yes, but not hollow. Not defeated. He was choosing. Still, the hardest part loomed. Leaving. Telling Greg and Tracy. Facing the storm. Alan advised him to keep it clean, professional. Don't burn bridges, just walk away. But Marcus knew Greg. Greg wouldn't let it be clean. He'd mock. He'd belittle. He'd try to make Marcus feel small on his way out, and maybe, just maybe, Marcus was ready to stop playing nice. The night before he planned to resign, Marcus sat in the living room with the lights off. He thought about everything he'd built it. For the company, everything he'd given. All the years, the sacrifices, the moments with his kids he'd never get back. And then he thought about the list on his legal pad. The names of people who believed in him, not the logo on his business card. It was all there. His past and his future, staring at him. The decision was made. Tomorrow he wouldn't just be Marcus Varrion, underpaid, underappreciated company man. Tomorrow he'd be something else. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing, with absolute certainty. He was done letting anyone else decide his worth. Monday morning, Marcus dressed like it was any other workday. Crisp shirt, pressed slacks, polished shoes. On the outside, he looked the same as always. But inside, his pulse was steady, focused. Today wasn't routine. Today was war. He slipped his resignation letter into his briefcase, double-checked that the client contact list he'd memorized was secure in his mind. Not on paper, not in email, nowhere they could accuse him of theft. Just him. Just relationships. When he walked through the office doors, he noticed things he hadn't before. The forced smiles, the endless chatter about synergy and efficiency, the exhausted faces of his team, people who gave their all while leadership wrung them dry. Greg's office door was open. Marcus didn't knock. He just walked in. Greg glanced up, annoyed at the interruption, then smirked. "Marcus, what can I do for you?" Marcus set the letter on his desk. "I'm resigning, effective immediately." Greg chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. You'll cool off." "No," Marcus said calmly. "I'm done. You cut me in half and expected me to thank you for it. You wanted me broken, but all you did was free me." Greg's smirk faltered. "You're making a mistake. Do you have any idea what you're walking away from?" Marcus leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Do you have any idea what I'm walking toward?" Greg shifted uncomfortably, but quickly put his mask back on. "You'll be irrelevant in 6 months. Nobody leaves this company and lands on their feet." Marcus almost laughed. "We'll see." He turned and walked out, not waiting for a response. From HR intercepted him near the elevators, holding a stack of papers. "Marcus, we'll need you to sit down for an exit interview. Return your laptop, your phone, all company property." Marcus held up a hand. "Laptop's on my desk. Phone's wiped and turned in. Exit interview? Save it. You already told, me everything I need to know." Tracy's polite mask wavered. She stepped closer, voice low. "You're making a risky move. I hope you've thought this through." Marcus looked her dead in the eye. "For the first time in years, I actually have." The elevator door slid open. He stepped inside, turned back for one last look, and let the doors close. Walking out of that building felt surreal. For 9 years, it had defined him. It had owned him. Now it was behind him. Literally. He got into his car, pulled out his phone, and called Alan. "It's done," Marcus said. On the other end, Alan let out a long breath. "Good. Now the real work starts." The next few weeks were chaos. Paperwork, investor meetings, late-night calls with Alan. But amid the frenzy, Marcus felt something he hadn't in years. Energy. He reached out to former clients, not with a pitch, not yet, but with honesty. "I've left the company. I'm building something new. If you're curious, I'd love to talk." And to his surprise, the response was overwhelming. Some were cautious, some were curious, and some said the words Marcus never expected to hear. "We've been waiting for you to leave. Tell us where to sign, huh?" The very relationships Greg and Tracy had undervalued, and the ones they thought were just names in a database, were proving to be Marcus's greatest weapon. One evening, after a marathon day of meetings, Marcus picked up Ethan and Lily from school. Lily climbed into the back seat, chattering about her day. Ethan, quieter, studied his dad for a moment. "You look different," Ethan said. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. "Different how?" "You don't look tired anymore," Ethan replied. Marcus swallowed hard. He smiled, eyes stinging. Yeah, buddy, I guess I don't. Back at home, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the same place where he'd cried, planned, and decided. Now the table was covered in contracts, notes, and sketches of the company logo Alan's friend was designing. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was creation. Greg's words echoed in his head. You'll be irrelevant in 6 months? Marcus smiled to himself. 6 months from now, Greg wouldn't even see him coming. The showdown wasn't just walking out of that office. It was proving, day by day, that his worth had never been tied to their paycheck. And now, for the first time in his life, Marcus Varrion was free to build something that no one could cut in half. 6 months later, Marcus sat in a glass-walled office that wasn't big, wasn't flashy, but it was his. The company he and Alan had built was still small, bare-bones staff, lean budgets, late nights, but the momentum was real. Clients had signed, contracts were flowing. They weren't just surviving, they were growing. It wasn't easy. There were nights Marcus barely slept, mornings he questioned everything, days when cash flow made his stomach twist, but each obstacle only sharpened him. And unlike the old job, every ounce of effort went toward building his future, not padding someone else's bonus. One Friday afternoon, Marcus took his kids to the office. Ethan marveled at the whiteboards covered in plans. Lily drew her name on a sticky note and slapped it on the wall. "This is ours?" she asked. Marcus knelt beside her, smiling. "Yeah, kiddo, this is ours." He realized then that what he was building wasn't just a company. It was a legacy, something his kids could see, touch, believe in. Not a paycheck that could be halved at someone else's whim, but a foundation no one could take away. Word about Marcus's move spread through the industry. Some former colleagues reached out quietly, hinting they wanted to join him when the timing was right. Others simply said they were proud of him. And then came the rumor. Greg's division was struggling. Clients had grown restless. Some had already jumped ship to Marcus. When Marcus heard, he didn't gloat. He didn't send a smug message. He just smiled, closed his office door, and got back to work. Because the truth was, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. One evening, long after the office had emptied, Marcus sat alone at his desk. The city lights flickered outside. He thought back to the man in the car, crying into his steering wheel, the man who felt powerless, humiliated, owned. And he thought about the man he was now, scared sometimes, yes, but strong, choosing his own path, building something from nothing. He whispered to himself, I made it. Not in the sense of being done. The road ahead was still long, uncertain, but he'd crossed the line that mattered most, the line between being owned and owning his future. To you, watching this right now, maybe you're stuck in your own version of Marcus's story. Maybe you're grinding at a job that takes more than it gives. Maybe you've been told your worth is less than you know it is. Here's the truth. Sometimes the shove that breaks you is the same shove that frees you. Marcus thought his pay cut was the end. Turns out it was the beginning. So whatever your Greg looks like, whatever is telling you you're worth less, remember this. Your value isn't theirs to decide. And with that said, thanks for watching. Until next time, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this.